RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Green Party says it's absolutely galling Air New Zealand's chief executive cannot name all the countries whose militaries have contracts with his company. The airline has started 2 reviews after it was revealed it had a contract with the Saudi Navy. Greg Foran has previously said it had military contracts with 5 or 6 countries, but could only name the US, Australia and New Zealand when asked today. The Green MP Golriz says that's shocking.
Having just admitted before the Select Committee that they had no process in place to ensure that they weren't literally committing war crimes via those contracts, that he hasn't looked at that is unbelievable.
Golriz wants Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee to hold an independent investigation. The National Party says the government is taking too long to expand the flexi wage scheme to help up to 40,000 unemployed people into work. Labour kicked off its election campaign by promising to expand the subsidy criteria and the average amount businesses can receive. It promised to make the changes before Christmas, but they'll now take effect next Monday. National Social Development spokesperson Louise Upston says the delay isn't good enough.
If you lost a job in December, it has a serious impact on you. And I'm just really concerned. The Minister's kind of flippant comments in the House seem to indicate she's actually not that worried about the individual people who've lost their jobs, who are on benefits.
Louise Upston says the government should adopt National's Job Start plan instead. The Crown says a man used his position as a state-approved carer for boys to sexually abuse them for years and then threaten them into silence. The High Court trial of Earl William Opetaia, a former boxing coach and child, youth and family carer, began today in Auckland. Of the 150 boys in his charge in the mid-2000s, 8 have alleged serious sexual abuse against him, as a Crown prosecutor Archibald told the court.
He was supposed to care for them, and rather than provide these boys with the safe and secure environment that they desperately needed, Mr. Opetaia used them. Mr. Opetaia was paid by the state to care for these boys, and instead he exploited them.
Crown lawyer Bal Archibald. A Samoan church whose employees stole millions of dollars has been struck off the charities register. The Samoan Seventh-day Adventist Church, or SISDAC, has 10 churches in the Auckland region. Mackenzie Smith reports.
A 2-year investigation by Charities Services has found former Treasurer Joseph Stowers took nearly $500,000 from the church. Pastor Willie Papu Jr. received $316,000 in personal benefits. Elizabeth Papu, who was jailed for 2 years in 2017 for stealing $1.6 million, was found to have misappropriated a further $766,000. SISDAC also put nearly $1 million into the cryptocurrency OneCoin and $1.7 million into WFE Capital, both possible scams according to the Financial Markets Authority. Call Mackenzie Smith, TNA.
The family of a woman seriously injured in a hit and run on a Lower Hutt pedestrian crossing 12 days ago says she does not hate the driver and forgives him. Anna Chesterfield remains in hospital in a stable condition. Her cousin Nikki Wilton says she is a caring, kind person who believes in the best in people.
When I spoke to Anna, she indicated to me that she has absolutely no hate towards this person, that she forgives them for what they did, and that obviously it was just a mistake that they had made.
The man charged with hitting Ms Chesterfield had his first appearance in court today. He was named as 27-year-old Jade Mark Harris of Nainai. The main highway through southern Hawke's Bay is shut as firefighters battle a large scrub fire at Takapo, southeast of Waipokoro. State Highway 2 is closed between State Highway 50 and Ashcott Road. It's 4 minutes past 5. Michael Scott is stepping down as Chief Executive of High Performance Sport New Zealand. After 3 years in charge at the government organisation, he says COVID-19 is forcing him home to Melbourne to be closer to his family. Scott will finish at the end of April when Sport New Zealand boss Raylene Castle will take over as acting CEO. Bill Moran, who chairs Sport New Zealand's board, says it will consider options for high performance sports structure and leadership in light of a new strategy being unveiled next week. Luna Rossa skipper Max Serena says his crew will be more race fit than Team UK heading into the America's Cup Challenger Series final. The best of 13 series starts on Saturday. Serena insists that the Italians have an edge from racing in the semi-finals, while Team UK were limited to using the simulator to hone their racecraft on the ever-evolving AC-75.
For sure, if you ask a sailor if he's preferring to do more race than training, I guess the answer is racing. I think we need to still understand and accept the fact we only race a few times with this new boat. We sail quite a lot, but we only race probably less than 10 times. So every racing day is gold.
Max Serena. Canterbury have beaten Central Districts by 4 wickets to secure a place in the men's domestic T20 cricket final. They'll play the Wellington Firebirds on Saturday's final in Wellington. That's the news.
A major quake hits the South Pacific.
Stay out of the water, stay off the beaches because of the possibility of surges and unusual currents.
Democrats air their grievances at Donald Trump's impeachment trial.
He told them to fight like hell, and they brought us hell.
And doubt cast on the World Health Organization's findings on the origins of COVID-19.
I think in the coming days and weeks there'll be much discussion about the findings of this group, and they're finding it hard to get above the politics.
When stories break overnight, we bring them to you when you wake. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Wellington, including central high country, also Waited Upper. Generally fine, isolated showers about Wellington and Waited Upper tomorrow morning. Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers clearing today, then mainly fine weather. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Clearing tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine. For Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Mostly fine, scattered showers about Buller and Westland clearing tonight. Canterbury, fine today, cloudy tomorrow morning with drizzle about the foothills, then becoming fine. Otago, excluding Clutha, mainly fine, isolated showers clearing tonight. Clutha, Fiordland and Southland, scattered showers clearing tomorrow morning, then becoming fine. And Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers tomorrow morning. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, the latest in the lead contamination scare. In the past half hour, the Dunedin City Council says work has initiated on replacing up to 5 kilometres of old water pipes that have lead joins. They say residents may notice work on Edinburgh Street and surrounding areas. The Waikawaiti raw water reservoir will be drained early next week to allow lead joins there to be replaced and sediment to be tested and cleaned out. The council has also ordered a lead monitor that will draw water samples and provide results every 20 minutes. The cause of the contamination, though, is not yet known. Initial test results show no lead contamination in the Waikawaiti River, but there's still more results to come, and the Otago Regional Council is ramping up surveillance. The river feeds the reservoir that's tested positive for high levels of lead. Otago Regional Council Chief Executive Sarah Gardner explains the latest results.
Otago Regional Council is working in partnership with Dunedin City Council. We have different responsibilities to Dunedin City Council, so we're responsible for drinking water at source. And because of that, we're involved. We took water samples on the morning of the 4th of February after the warning was issued by Dunedin City Council not to drink the water. The results have come back today, and those results found no lead at detectable levels in the river water.
So, because you are responsible for source, it's only the river that you're taking tests from?
We are working with DCC in partnership, but mainly focusing on the river. So we're testing river water, and also we've tested river sediment, but we're waiting for those results to come back.
Why sediment? What would that tell you that may be different from testing the water itself?
It could be lead to heavy metals, so it could be that the source of the contamination is sitting in the sediment and polluting the water from there rather than being mobilised in the water itself.
Obviously, when you take a sample of water, that's a point-in-time test.
That's right.
And I know you're not a technical person, but the sediment, is it likely that that will give you a longer sample over a period of time? It would show more up, that maybe if there was earlier contamination, it could still be there?
Right. So, yes and no is my understanding. So what I would say is these results that we have today, they give us a snapshot, a point in time, as you said. They also give us some direction for further investigation. But really what we need to do is an in-depth investigation that will involve extensive surface water and sediment monitoring of the river. Because it's only if you do that and you have a number of samples and you get a number of results that you can generate some confidence in what's actually happening.
When was the last time the river was tested? Before this?
I'm sorry, I don't have the information to hand, except to say that testing for lead is not part of the standard state of the environment suite of testing that we do routinely.
Yeah, understand that. But as far as you know, prior to the situation you now have there was nothing untoward with previous river tests, assuming you do test it regularly.
We have no record of any lead in the water at that site, but that's not to say that we have a complete record or even extensive testing of lead at that site.
Okay. Do you know how often you do test the river water?
We have a state of the environment monitoring program, but like I said, that doesn't test for lead. So, no, I don't have the details of how often we test for lead, or in fact, if we do.
What are your kind of working scenarios at this point? Because you're still looking for where the contamination is coming from.
Yes, absolutely, and I don't think we've discounted any possibilities really. We've had a look at some particular sites. We've had a look at consent monitoring in the area that hasn't given us any cause for concern, and so really that's why we're continuing to investigate, because we fully understand that the community needs to have some confidence around what's going on in their environment.
So when you say you've looked at some consent monitoring, are you talking about companies that might be releasing waste? You've checked in on them?
Yes, we've looked at consent monitoring in the catchment, so that we can be certain that there's nothing that's showing up there, and as yet there's nothing that would indicate to us that there's a source of lead as a result of those activities. But as I said, we're continuing to investigate, and we'll keep doing those investigations until we get a satisfactory result, whether that's being able to confirm with confidence that the river water isn't the issue, or whether that's finding something that is the source of contamination.
Can you rule out sabotage?
Look, it's not really for me to say. Other than that, if there is lead in the river water or in the sediment, then we expect we should find that with the investigations we're undertaking.
Are the police involved in any way in helping with this investigation?
Not as far as I'm aware. As I said, our role is quite limited to the investigation and the water source, but it's possible that other parties involved may have contacted police, but I'm not aware of that.
So in terms of the differentiation of your roles, you're in charge of water at the source and it ends up in the reservoir, right? So the piping to get it there, who's in charge of that?
That's the City Council's responsibility. So Dunedin City Council is the water supplier and they are responsible for the network. We are responsible for protecting drinking water quality at source.
So in terms of your ongoing investigations, you're going to test the river more and over a period of time, a longer period of time, to get a better picture. What else are you up to?
At the moment, it really depends on what we find. So we'll be reporting those results of the sediment testing we've done. We expect them next week. That may tell us something. So at the moment, it really depends on what we find as we get each result back.
So your testing frequency has been ramped up?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you know, can you give us an idea of how much?
Well, I think we're taking it in stages, but I know, for example, that there is a catchment investigation underway that will include extensive surface water and sediment monitoring of the river. So, it's certainly a significant deal more of monitoring and testing than we would have done routinely.
And that is Sarah Gardner from Otago Regional Council. And the ORC has also confirmed to Checkpoint other areas of interest that have been investigated and ruled out. A flyover by the DCC identified 2 sites of interest that Otago Regional Council has tested. A site with containers and old tyres around 30 metres from the river and near the Waikawaiti water treatment plant. A site with clean fill and waste at the headwaters of the Waikawaiti River. Now, both sites have been ruled out as sources of the lead contamination. Meanwhile, an East Otago mother has been left confused and concerned as blood test results start to roll in after a lead contamination testing blitz. It's been more than a week since residents in Waikawaiti, Karatane and Hawkesbury Village were told not to drink or cook with their tap water. Since then, hundreds of people have been tested at the free community blood testing clinic, which opened on Tuesday, with some part-time and former residents also requesting tests. Tess Brunton has more.
Karatane mother of 3, Jazz Hansen, has been waiting to get the results for her 5-month-old son since they got tested on Tuesday, but she missed the first call.
So then I went to ring it back and it comes back as a COVID hotline. So then I was like, well, what's going on? Because I obviously didn't put those two together that they'd be ringing from the same place.
Receiving the results was both a relief and stressful. Her son's result was 0.1, less than half the Southern District Health Board's threshold of 0.24. Jazz Hansen says she's still worried because her neighbour's 14-year-old son had half the level of her son.
But I just thought that was so weird because he's 5 months old, so, like, where did that come from? And then I said to her, like, well, how does that happen? He's 5 months old. And she said, oh, well, you know, he could have drunk the water on the day of the spike, or he has been putting stuff in his mouth, but he's 5 months old, so he absolutely hates being on the ground. So he's quite often sitting with us or carrying him or whatever.
Ms Hansen says so far she doesn't know of anyone who has received results near or above the threshold. She didn't know all of the test results would be coming through individually, so she didn't get her results at the same time as her son.
At the time, when you're trying to digest information and then they don't know where yours is, you start to panic because you're like, oh, are they not telling me because they need some advice first before they tell me, or what's the deal? So it's like a wee bit of panic as well.
Ms Hansen is planning to speak to her doctor about the results. Michelle Cox has lived in Waikawaiti for nearly a decade.
No one can say how long those spikes actually last, you know, what that duration is in the water. So if there's something in one moment, you know, no one can say, well, it's only been there a few hours. So we wouldn't know who's been drinking the water at what time of the week and, you know, whether that's been part of that spike or not, or whether they've missed spikes.
The recent water scare has motivated her family to go beyond getting their blood tested.
We are personally putting in a water catchment from our roof. We're just finishing re-roofing, so we know that we have a toxic-free surface to harvest water from for drinking water. So we're going to try and remove that question ourselves by going independently with a water tank for rainwater.
One Hawkesbury Village part-time resident and her partner decided to get tested, but didn't want to travel from her main home in South Canterbury to the free clinic. She's been more than happy with the support from Public Health South and is lined up to get tested tomorrow at her local GP.
Where somebody that had left from any of the other communities may not quite see the need or the importance from a statistical point of view. Somebody who's been resident for 20 years might have moved on, and their statistics, I believe, are very, very important if there is any issue.
Anyone who has lived or worked in the affected area for 1 month in the past year or 2 weeks for pregnant women and babies is eligible for a funded test. The Southern DHB's Medical Officer of Health and Public Health Physician, Dr. Michael Borchard, says several former residents have been in contact. He says lead does build up slowly and leave the body slowly once exposure stops.
So if people have not lived in the area for some time, then it's very unlikely that any levels that may have been caused by the water would still be causing their blood level to be an area or a level of concern.
Dr. Borchard says testing former residents will provide reassurance and help to build a better picture of whether there is a long-term contamination problem. He expects a public meeting to discuss the community's results will be held before the end of the month. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, TNA.
It is 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that. Did you get tested and have you got your results back? Get in touch. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Air New Zealand's issued another apology over the Royal Saudi Navy contract, this time to MPs. The national carrier has been under fire after it admitted this week its gas turbines unit had been working on engines for the Saudi Navy. CEO Greg Foran and board chair Dame Therese Walsh fronted to a parliamentary select committee this morning, but while the apologies were coming thick and fast, they were less forthcoming with answers to the many questions that remain. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The top brass arrived prepared for a grilling.
We have fallen short.
Far short, and the chair, Dame Therese Walsh, knows it.
We take this deeply seriously and we will do everything required to make it right.
Beginning with an apology.
Undertaking work like this is certainly not acceptable to me. For that reason, I apologise on behalf of Air New Zealand that this has occurred.
A comprehensive display of damage control. The Chief Executive, Greg Foran, says he first learned of the case only 12 days ago, despite media making inquiries back in December. He says a junior comms staffer did not escalate it.
As soon as we became aware of it, we stopped it.
The contract was signed back in May 2019 under the former Chief Executive Chris Luxon, but Mr Foran says the deal was worth just $3 million and so would not have been referred up to him or Mr Luxon. A response prompting incredulity from Green MP Golriz Garman.
Are you saying that at Air New Zealand there is only a monetary threshold for when the CEO is made aware of business, including business that your company may be entering into that may be involving very serious criminal activity?
We need to tighten up that procedure.
Mr Foran says he's been advised the now cancelled contract is the only one Air New Zealand had linked to the Saudi Navy, but he was less forthcoming about what other militaries the airline has worked for or even currently is. Instead, he repeatedly deferred to the reviews underway, one internal investigation by the airline and another independent one it commissioned by PwC.
I need time. The organisation needs time to now go through and analyse not just what we're doing from a naval perspective, but what else we're doing in this component of our business.
Does that mean that there's a chance, and it must mean, that there's currently a chance that in those remaining military contracts that Air New Zealand may still currently be aiding international humanitarian crimes?
I think that's something that you need to give us a little bit of time to get in and do the details on.
But you can't confirm that there isn't that chance?
We need to do the work.
Golriz Garman says that's not good enough.
That he hasn't looked at that is unbelievable. That previous CEOs had no way of telling if their company was committing crimes, including crimes against humanity, is absolutely galling. We should be frightened.
The Greens want all military contracts put on hold and a completely independent investigation held, one potentially run by a parliamentary select committee. But the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says he does not see the need for that at this stage.
What I've said is I'm looking forward to Air New Zealand doing a thorough inquiry, reporting that back to us. We also have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade looking at those issues around the export control orders. Let's get that done. Let's see if that's sufficient and then we can make a decision.
Air New Zealand hopes to have that report back within 2 to 4 weeks and with it, hopefully some answers. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Speaking of airlines, ones that yet to get off the ground plans to take bookings for flights to the Cook Islands from next month, even though it doesn't have a single plane right now and there's no signs of COVID travel restrictions lifting. You may know him as the face of real estate and mortgage businesses, but Mike Perrow's spreading his wings into aviation with his new company, Pacifica Air. Perrow's offering a money-back guarantee if COVID grounds flights, Christchurch to the Cooks, or there's no isolation cancellation-free travel bubble. He's aiming for takeoff in June, but don't expect cheap tickets.
We're not a budget airline, so low-cost carriers traditionally race to the bottom. They cut corners and people get to the end of the queue and find, oh, sorry, you missed the deadline, or, okay, you're going to have to pay for this and that. We're not in a race to the bottom, so we're not competing with Air New Zealand or Jetstar. Where they're going on price, we're going on service, and we'll just maintain a fair and reasonable price and deliver a service standard that is appropriate for the destinations, and really we think there's a gap in the market. So
what will your price point be, just generally, Mike?
Look, I won't go into the final pricing just yet because that's not finalised, but we're not a discounter. So we're not trying to be a low-cost carrier, and it surprises me that airlines are still going out there across the ditch. We've got three airlines there, Qantas, Rex, and Virgin Australia Mark II. And they're all competing on price. They're all saying that we can be cheaper. And today I see the headlines there, we can be cheaper across Australia than your taxi fare to the airport. So they're setting each other up to fail. And there will be another, I think there will be fallout because they don't have the aviation market that they had, or airline market that they had 12, 14 months ago. It's all gone, and now we've got three airlines scrapping for the lowest price. So
don't expect a cheapy deal with Pacifica Air.
I think what people are looking for is an experience, and you can see that people are paying, and I'm not saying it's going to be any more than our competitors that have flown to the Pacific. In fact, it probably will be less, but what we're saying is I don't want to compete on price. We won't compete on price. We'll give you an experience that only Pacifica can do.
And so what will be that experience that makes you unique?
Well, that's the surprise. You'll just have to wait. So go online and book now. And,
come on, Mike. Come on. In all seriousness.
There's obvious things that people look for when they're booking. The cheapest this or that won't necessarily get you what you get if you went to a particular store or this or that.
But what can you offer? What can you offer on a short flight that is going to make your airline unique? What are the bells and whistles you're offering here then?
Well, you'll just have to wait and see, Lisa, and the listeners can, by the end of March, they can go online and see what our offering is. But look, we are doing something that no one else has done.
Are you going to fly the plane, Mike?
Probably not, no. No, I would love to, but no, I've been there, done that. So going forward, my role is obviously the CEO. We've got a great team. It's all New Zealanders, and pretty much the whole operation is based in New Zealand. We're using Boeing aircraft, good Boeing aircraft, and we'll be delivering, I think you'll find the service standards and our delivery will all be what Kiwis want.
Okay, we need some quick things covered off here. So if you could give me some quick answers to these, that'd be great. Are your planes secured? You've locked in a lease of some sort?
No, we've got the luxury of choice, and we're just waiting for the right time. There's aircraft across the world. We want a particular type and a particular standard, and at this stage we're negotiating with, I'd say, about 9 lease options, and like every airline, and Air New Zealand, Emirates and Qantas, they all spend months pouring through all the options, and you get to the best one, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we don't have to. You normally have a situation like this 2 to 3 months lead in, and that's what we've got. But
okay, so crew, have you got pilots? Have you got cabin crew?
Oh, absolutely. And these
hired,
are all
signed up?
No, we don't hire this far out, but we've got a list that would service a fleet. There's so many well-qualified airline pilots out there, captains. So initially we'll be running 2 captains, not a co-pilot, but 2 captains on every flight, and they'll come from the very best. And unfortunately, some of these guys have left Virgin Australia or were made redundant, but these are the very top guys. And same with the flight attendants. We've got a great choice, and they're all Boeing 737 qualified. And so despite the fact that there's thousands of former Air New Zealand flight attendants out there, we have to have Boeing 737 type-rated people.
How many flights a week are you aiming for?
Well, between Wellington and Christchurch to the Cooks or to Rarotonga, there'll be 6 return flights a week. So between the two ports, being Wellington and Christchurch, we'll alternate between the two.
And if people book a flight and you don't get off the ground, are they going to get their money back?
Yep. Unlike any other airline in New Zealand, our money will be, all prepayments will be held at Public Trust in Wellington, which is a state-owned enterprise, and we won't touch their money until they've flown. So we don't even want to get to where others have. Suddenly there was a rush on money and the airlines got flooded with inquiries on our money back. I think there was... sadly, that they bought non-refundable fares, but we're making it so that subject to COVID, if it is a COVID-19 or 21, whatever it turns out to be, then they can just go online, click, 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 and the money comes back. We just haven't got time to upset people. We don't want to take off of their money. We don't want to give them credits if they don't want them. They'll have that choice, but it'll be just 3 or 4 clicks with their booking reference, their surname and da-da-da, and they'll get their refund within 5 days.
Right. Last question. Aviation is expensive. Where is the money coming from to set this up?
Comes from bank accounts, from people, high net wealth individuals. That,
who
including myself.
are your investors, Mike?
I will tell you down the line. You'll see that on our website, but you'll be quite pleased and surprised. We've been overwhelmed. We've been overwhelmed with the amount of support out of New Zealand and the Pacific, and complete strangers have come up. But look, we're going through
any public grants or assistance?
No. We're private enterprise, and we're doing this all off our own back. But we're serious investors, and you'll see when the final lineup of directors is appointed, there's a hell of a lot of experience there in airlines, and the people we've got, our 6 senior managers with over 180 years experience in airlines, going back to Air New Zealand, Ansett, Qantas, and so on, right through. So years and years of experience, and been there, done that before. They've all been involved in airlines, and we know what we're doing.
Mike Perot there from Pacifica Air. And a quick traffic update now. State Highway 2 is closed in Takapo in central Hawke's Bay because of a large grass fire. The closure is between the intersections with State Highway 50 and Ashcott Road. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the government expands its overdue flexi wage scheme. We've got the details. A man's in court over a hit and run that's left a mother seriously injured. And we go gardening behind the wire at Christchurch Men's Prison. We would love your feedback. What do you think about the plans for this new airline, Pacifica Air? Get in touch. Text us on 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines with Susanna.
The Green Party says it's absolutely galling New Zealand's chief executive cannot name all the countries whose militaries have had contracts with his company. The airline has started 2 reviews after it was revealed its engineers worked on Saudi Navy engines. Greg Foran has previously said it had military contracts with 5 or 6 countries, but could only name the US, Australia and New Zealand when asked today. The Green MP Golriz Garaman says that's shocking and unbelievable. The Dunedin City Council is replacing 5 kilometres of very old cast iron water pipes in Waikawaiti, north of the city. The council says the pipes have lead joins and the work is a response to intermittent spikes in the level of lead in the area's drinking water. The council's Three Waters Group manager, Tom Dyer, says the cause of lead contamination has not been confirmed, but this will remove one potential source. The Wellington City Council could increase rates by 17% in the next year to pay for infrastructure and resilience. The Mayor, Andy Foster, has revealed his budget for the city over the next 10 years, which focuses on upgrading the city's ageing and failing water pipes as well as earthquake strengthening key public buildings. The family of a woman seriously injured in a hit and run on a pedestrian crossing in the Hutt Valley last month says it could be more than a year before she fully recovers. Anna Chesterfield was struck at a pedestrian crossing in Taita, suffering sustained fractures to her face, sternum and arm and a badly injured leg. The man charged with hitting Miss Chesterfield had his first appearance in court today. The main highway through southern Hawke's Bay is shut as firefighters battle a large scrub fire at Takapo, southeast of Waipukaro. State Highway 2 is closed between State Highway 50 and Ashcott Road. Firefighters are battling the blaze in hot and windy conditions. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And we've got another traffic update for you. There has been a crash on State Highway 3 at Awahuri in the Manawatu Whanganui area. The crash is near the intersection with Palmerston Street in Wakakotahi. The Transport Agency is asking motorists to follow the directions from emergency services who are on the ground there and do expect delays. Time to get to the business news now with Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, this food delivery service, My Food Bag, it's finally confirming its plans to list.
Yeah, after flirting with the idea for 9 years, or really since the company was founded back in 2012, it's finally decided to pull the trigger.
Wow, it's been that long.
It's been around that long. You know, when it first came on the scene, there was big talks about how it's going to disrupt the supermarket sector. Unsure if we've seen that, but look, it's had a tremendous journey over that time. It now has plans to list on both the New Zealand and the Australian Stock Exchange. It will sell up to 185 million shares at $1.85 each, which places a value on the company at just under $450 million. And to put that in context, today, the medical services company Third Age Health, they actually listed on the stock exchange today, but they had a market capitalisation or a value of $21 million. So quite a hefty value placed on this company ahead of its listing on the NZX. You can imagine the NZX is loving this, to have a company of this size on its main board. But today's announcement, it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, because last month the wheels really set in motion with My Food Bag actually going out to its customers and asking them would they like to buy a slice in the company. This was for them a way to gauge what sort of interest there was out there amongst investors, and more than 10,000 customers came back and said, yes, we would love to reserve an allocation of shares to actually purchase a slice of the company should it decide to list. And you can really imagine that played some sort of role in the announcement we heard today. Also, I spoke to the CEO. He says that the company it's grown. It's now at a significant size, and listing is the next best option for it. With the money it plans to raise, it looks to fund future growth and also flexibility on its balance sheet, pay down debts and sort of square up things there. So, for instance, and in terms of that growth, it is worth mentioning that following the lockdown, subscriptions...
I was going to say COVID, it's got to have been the convenience and all the rest of it.
All of it, yep. Subscriptions grew by a whopping 22%. And that's because people were shopping more online and less in person. And that sharp rise has really set the company on track for a record profit for the current financial year. And crucially for the company, they say they haven't seen a notable drop in subscriptions as we've moved further and further away from those COVID-19 lockdowns. So the challenge for them going forward is maintaining these current levels, but also further growth in the future, because they're not just up against the likes of HelloFresh, which is a similar style service, but also supermarkets. More and more of them are offering online shopping services, because companies like it in both the US and Australia, who started off with a hiss and a roar and then listed, haven't fared particularly well on share markets. So it'll be really interesting to see how they go. And surprise, surprise, My Food Bag, they're confident that they'll fare particularly well. So look, keep an eye on this space. They plan to list on March the 5th.
Interesting. Okay, AMP Wealth, pretty dreary result, you're saying?
Yeah, full year results sort of marred by COVID-19 a bit. So AMP Wealth Management, they are an Australian-based financial services group, but it has a New Zealand unit on the ground here, and they specialise in all things to do with KiwiSaver. Its earnings for the year to December, that fell by nearly a fifth, from $47 million to $38.5 million, as the pandemic really dented its profit margins. But it's not just its profits that were hurt. Interestingly, they revealed that more than $10 million had been withdrawn from KiwiSaver funds on hardship grounds. So that really speaks to the situation that many people were finding themselves in. Also, they've also provided us with some more information that they've also seen a significant increase in inquiries about people withdrawing money from their KiwiSavers to put towards deposits. Interestingly, though, is that not many of those have actually flown through to actual withdrawals. So you can probably imagine that people were eyeing up houses, young people. They're typically people who look to withdraw from their KiwiSaver. And when it came to actually pull the trigger and buy a house, the price was probably just too astronomical, so they thought it'd probably sit in their hands. So the company, they say its inflows, it improved over the course of the year, and it finished actually up with total funds under management up by 4% to $13.3 billion. And now it's expecting a bit of a turnaround in its fortunes now that the worst of the COVID-19 economic impact is firmly in the rearview mirror.
Okay, let's take a trot around the markets.
Yeah, the NZX continues to lose ground. It's down 69 points, and there's just this feeling of uncertainty with regard to Brexit amongst investors at the moment. Our dollar is at 72.2 US cents, 93.4 Australian, 52.1 British pence, and Bitcoin, I didn't have an update for you yesterday, it's at 62,000 62,000 New Zealand dollars for a single Bitcoin.
For a single Bitcoin.
Down about $2,000 on yesterday.
But still, thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with our business update there. Plans for a controversial and costly Christchurch Cycleway will continue despite an attempt to halt the process earlier today. Hundreds of residents and several business owners are frustrated and upset they weren't involved prior to the creation of the $19 million design. Christchurch City Council has now promised to involve the community as they improve their heavily criticised plans. Alicia Foon has more.
Dubbed Wheels to Wings, the $19 million cycleway is planned for the main thoroughfare of Harewood Road, linking the Christchurch city to the airport and surrounding areas. But it would also cut 4 lanes of traffic to 2 and reduce on-street parking. Residents and business owners in Bishopdale and Papanui have no faith in the current design and want to see it done better. Copenhagen bakery owner Donna Thompson has voiced concerns alongside 10 other businesses. She says they're gutted about the way it's played out.
As a business owner and speaking on behalf of residents in the area, and a lot of them are elderly and very concerned about losing their car parks and not being able to get in their car and drive to, to local areas, and get a car park in this particular area. There are a lot of services, and our cafe also provides a good service to the community. But many people come from destinations and they drive. They cannot get on a bike. But the project in itself, we feel, has been quite deflating because it's out of our control to a point where we have not had any input into the design at all.
She says the council and the transport agency's approach has left the community feeling disempowered. Featherston's dairy manager Vidhi Patel reckons it's a bad idea that needs major changes.
They should have asked, or gave us better option. And it should be not only business purpose, this is the whole neighborhood. They should ask everybody whether we are interested to getting one or not. This is not their choice. It's definitely main road, it is government property, but people live on the road.
Scott Franisevic also raised concerns over school children safely using the road with council today.
Instead of talking about kids getting safely to school and people being able to safely use this road, the issues that really matter is we're talking about what council processes and so forth, where it's pretty clear with the sentiment in the community and sentiment across the city that the engagement processes just aren't reaching the people they need to be.
Today, 2 Christchurch City councillors U-turned their bid to stop the cycleway from going ahead, instead accepting to forge ahead so long as the community is involved in the plans. Aaron Kewen, who filed the notice of motion, says those affected should have always been involved.
If we'd gone out with multiple options, we would have had a completely different outcome from the community. Because to the community, it looked like we had an option. We're coming out to tell you what it is, and then we're going to deliver it within a year. It didn't say, tell us all the things you want and we'll make a whole lot of changes. So through the noise, hopefully this waste of time today will get us to a point where we can move forward.
Now a range of other design options will be presented to those in the affected area. The community board will get to have a say before the final design is voted on by council. The council's already spent $1 million on the designs. Now it's only a matter of time until the Harewood community find out whether the council keep their promises. For Checkpoint, ko Elisha Foon Tēnei.
Evidence from a man who died 2 years ago has been read out to a jury in a 30-year-old cold case. Waikato publican Chris Bush was gunned down during a robbery at the Red Fox Tavern in October 1987. Mark Hogarth and another man with name suppression are on trial in the High Court in Auckland, charged with murder and aggravated robbery, which they deny. Today, the jury heard evidence from some of those who were first on the scene. Our reporter Sarah Robson is covering the case and she filed this story.
On the night Chris Bush was shot dead, Peter Soppert was woken up by a phone call from his wife Sharon, who worked at the Red Fox Tavern. Mr Soppert died in 2019 and his 1987 statement to the police was read to the jury by Crown lawyer James Tobes.
She said to me, "Peter, there's been an armed hold-up and Chris has been shot." I asked her if she had rung the police. She said yes, but she hadn't. This would have been because she was shocked. You could tell from her voice something was drastically wrong.
Peter Soppert got into his old Bedford truck and headed to the Red Fox.
I didn't see anything or anyone at all between my house and the tavern. If there had been anyone around, I would have seen them.
When he got there, Peter Soppert said in his statement that part-time barman Bill Wilson came out to speak to him.
He said, "Chris is dead, come to your woman."
Peter Soppert said his wife was on the phone to the police. He walked into the lounge bar where Chris Bush was.
He was lying face down on the floor, his head was facing to the right. I saw a bit of blood but couldn't see any injuries.
Peter Soppert said he broke the news to Chris Bush's wife Gay that he was dead. In his second statement, given in 2017, Mr Soppert said he had known Mr Bush since he'd arrived in Maramarua to run the Red Fox Tavern. He said he was a good friend and a good publican who ran a tight ship.
When I say that Chris ran a tight ship, he didn't stand no nonsense. If he wanted to be a person to leave for whatever reason, and if he wasn't comfortable with them being on the premises, he didn't have a problem telling them to leave. He didn't hang back if he wanted someone gone. He would go up to them and tell them to leave.
Kevin O'Brien was the first ambulance officer on the scene the night of the shooting. His evidence was also read to the court by Crown lawyer James Tobes. Mr O'Brien said when he checked Chris Bush's body, he couldn't find a pulse or a heartbeat.
There was also a large amount of blood on the body and floor, but only on the left-hand side. The blood was congealed. It became obvious to me that the person was deceased. I remained with the body until the police arrived. I ensured that no one else touched the body.
The jury also heard evidence from now retired pathologist Warwick Smeaton, who examined Mr Bush's body. Dr Smeaton said gunshot pellets had penetrated Mr Bush's heart and lungs. He said the injuries were unsurvivable and Mr Bush would have died in less than a minute from blood loss and direct damage to the heart. The trial continues. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
The family of a woman seriously injured in a hit and run says she holds no malice towards the driver and forgives them. Anna Chesterfield was struck at a pedestrian crossing in the Lower Hutt suburb of Taita on January the 30th. And today the man charged with hitting her made his first appearance in court. Hamish Cardwell has the story.
Mother of two, Anna Chesterfield, was heading to the pharmacy that Saturday when a car ploughed into her. CCTV footage of the incident has been described as showing her being flung about 20 metres down the road, with the car not stopping or slowing down. Her cousin Nikki Wilton says Anna was badly injured.
She had fractures to her face and a fractured sternum. She had a fractured tibia and fibia and multiple bruising.
Was she in a lot of pain?
I think at the time she was, yes. But I think she has indicated that the adrenaline took over, so she probably didn't feel that pain until later on.
She had surgery last week. A rod was inserted into her leg, and she's in a stable condition. Today, she was transferred to Hutt Hospital, closer to family. Ms Wilton says they think it will take at least a year for Anna to fully recover, but she's making great progress.
She is remarkably well, considering what she's been through. Today, when I talked to her, she was very chatty. She is healing really well.
Ms Wilton says Anna is a caring, kind person who believes the best in people.
When I spoke to Anna, she indicated to me that she has absolutely no hate towards this person, that she forgives them for what they did, and that obviously it was just a mistake that they had made.
A Give a Little campaign has raised more than $12,000.
Oh, it's amazing. Initially, I really set it up just for family and close friends to contribute towards her rehabilitation and recovery, and it just absolutely has taken off, and it's just so amazing. And Anna is just so thankful and feels so blessed by everybody's kindness and generosity. It's amazing.
In the Hutt Valley District Court this morning, 27-year-old Jade Mark Harris from Nainai in Lower Hutt was named as the person arrested over the incident. He faces a charge of driving a vehicle carelessly causing injury, not stopping after being involved in an accident, and driving while forbidden. Mr Harris was remanded on bail on the condition he not try to contact the victim or her family and not drive a car. He is due back in court next week. For Checkpoint, ko Hamish Cardwell, TNA.
It is 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. After 6 tonight, the government expands its overdue flexi wage scheme. We'll explain how it will work. Millions of doses of the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine will soon be on their way to Australia. Frontline healthcare workers will be vaccinated first, but most Australians will eventually receive the AstraZeneca jab, despite concerns it doesn't protect against the South African strain of the virus. The ABC's Stephanie Snell has more.
In coming weeks and months, as Australia rolls out its vaccination program, we'll be hearing a lot more conversations like this.
I'm a senior. They tell me that I'll be one of the first.
Will you be putting your hand up to get the vaccine as soon as possible?
I think they said they'll notify me. I just don't like jabs.
But you'll do it in this instance?
Yes, yeah, of course we'll do it.
So are you a little bit more reluctant about getting the vaccine?
Yeah, a little bit. No, because I have a lot of different news about that.
Australia's first phase of coronavirus vaccinations for those at high risk is centred on the Pfizer vaccine that's due to be shipped soon. But most of the broader population will have to wait for the AstraZeneca vaccine. If AstraZeneca is the one that is available to you, will you feel confident having it?
I don't know. To be honest, I really don't know, and I think a lot of people are feeling like that just because we don't know enough about it. I wouldn't get a flu injection if it was only 60% going to stop me getting the flu. I don't know.
As debate about vaccine efficacy continues to swirl, the World Health Organization has officially backed the AstraZeneca vaccine after a small study found it wasn't very effective against the South African strain of the virus. Alejandra Cravioto is the chair of the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunisation for the World Health Organization.
We have made the recommendation that even if there is a reduction in the possibility of this vaccine having a full impact in its protection capacity, especially against severe disease, there is no reason not to recommend its use, even in countries that have the circulation of the variant.
The first phase of Australia's vaccine rollout is moving forward, but there's concern among those who will be administering the jabs that the federal government's ambitious targets for the second phase won't be met under its current plans.
And that report by the ABC's Stephanie Snell. As EU countries struggle to get their coronavirus vaccine programs off the ground, one Balkan country is doing very well. Serbia is on track to vaccinate a tenth of its population by the end of this month, mainly thanks to stockpiling doses from China and Russia and not waiting for EU approval. The BBC's Guy Delaunay reports.
Vaccines from China have put Serbia at the sharp end of the European inoculation race. Belgrade's also bought batches from Russia and Germany, and this dose of vaccine pragmatism is producing impressive results. The United Kingdom is the runaway leader in the European vaccination stakes, but Serbia is clearly the best of the rest, and far ahead of major European countries like Italy, Germany and France. Serbia's negotiating to join the European Union, but in a time of crisis, it's looking to Beijing and Moscow rather than Brussels.
For us, vaccination is not a geopolitical matter. For us, vaccination is a healthcare issue. Whether they come from China or the US or the EU, we don't care as long as they're safe and we get them as soon as possible.
Do you think that the European Union could learn something from the approach that Serbia's taken?
To be honest, I think the world has something to learn from Serbia. I think the world really needs to go back to multilateralism. When we see COVAX and the World Health Organization, the UN had to actually sit down, see what are the needs of the world.
China may be the other big winner. Its vaccines received a presidential welcome on arrival in Belgrade, sending a clear signal to Brussels about Beijing's increasing clout in the region.
The European Union is not present here, or at least not present in terms of a serious political strategy. So, as a result of this strategic short-sightedness by Brussels, they are losing big and allowing China to punch above its weight.
But people in Belgrade aren't bothered about the diplomatic ramifications or the origins of the vaccines. They're just happy to benefit from Serbia leading the way.
Guy Delornay in Serbia. Youth offenders at Christchurch Men's Prison have been learning gardening skills and growing award-winning vegetables. A program run in the youth unit is inspiring young men to pick up green thumb skills, helping some prisoners find jobs in horticulture on their release. Alicia Foon went to the prison to check it out.
Getting out in the garden is transforming the lives of these young inmates from the inside out.
I reckon the garden's taken pretty seriously in this unit. We love the opportunity to come out here. Gives us time to actually do something productive instead of sitting in our cells with our own thoughts, you know.
Corn, peaches, pumpkin, tomatoes, you name it. They've grown it from scratch. It's thanks to the help of volunteer Bronwyn Adams Hooper, who's been passing on her skills and earning the respect of these boys.
I was invited by the Harewood League to come in and teach the boys within the youth unit some basic horticultural skills. Just how to grow food, but skills which are actually really transferable, A, to feeding their own families, or if they wanted to go down the road of looking for a horticultural job, they'd have skills which were totally looked for within the industry. So they can grow seeds and plants right through from the seed right through to harvest, and they know that whole process and they know how to look after them.
The Harewood League's a charity aiming to reduce prison populations and reoffending. Canterbury branch president Cosmo Jeffrey says the program's worked well so far.
When they go out, we try and give support wherever possible, and 2 of the guys that have left the garden project have got jobs in horticulture. So it's only a small start, but it's a really good program for the outside as well.
And they've won awards too, with their endeavours recognised at local A&P shows, 3 years running. Bronwyn began entering them to boost their confidence.
They didn't think they were actually growing anything significant or really good, and I'd come in here and at the moment their corn over there is about a foot higher than mine and it looks way better, and so I started entering them in the local A&P shows, and it was a way for me to show them that when they put it up against other people's produce, their produce was actually awesome. They've won everything from the biggest marrows to the biggest tomatoes to the best rhubarb. Last year we actually they took out prizes for rock melons. Growing rock melons in Canterbury, most gardeners would tell you that's just about impossible.
I was part of the group of boys who picked the lettuces and the roses. I think we got first prize for our roses, which is pretty good. There was about 60 or 70 roses entered into the competition, and we got first and second prize for our roses.
How did that make you feel? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised and bloody proud of us. It's who would have thought a bunch of prisoners could have helped grow award-winning roses,
Youth Unit Principal Corrections Officer Andy Payton says it's been hugely beneficial for the inmates.
Stuff they get from the garden, they do send out to other agencies, but if there's any left over, they get the opportunity to bring it in and have a cook up in the unit. So yeah, it's great for them to see going from the garden to the unit to the plate.
Another inmate, who we'll call John, is enjoying the fruits of his labour.
We fry zucchinis and kamu, and we actually cooked our lettuces in the microwave. Yeah, well, that was good. It was nice.
For Bronwyn, the experience of volunteering in prison has changed her.
It's just really easy to see somehow how just like a little deviation in life can lead you here. It's not, sometimes it isn't what you would think it is. It's definitely helped me to, not be so judgmental, a lot more accepting. And it's also, I suppose, made me more aware of the problems within our systems and want to be sort of more part of the solution than just, judging.
She has a lot of faith in her gardeners. So much so, she reckons the boys could easily maintain a farm on their own. For Checkpoint, ko Elisha Foon, tēnei.
And if you were listening to that, it's well worth going online. Check out the video, which was filmed by Nate McKinnon. You can see the veg there. Some pretty amazing pictures. We'll put it up on our website. Some of you getting in touch about this fledgling airline, Pacifica Air, taking bookings from March. Good luck to them, says Les. It keeps the main players honest.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi noi ko Susana Leata with tēnei. The Green Party says it's absolutely galling that Air New Zealand's chief executive cannot name all the countries whose militaries have contracts with his company. The airline has started 2 reviews since it was revealed it had a contract with the Saudi Navy. Greg Foran has previously said it had military contracts with 5 or 6 countries, but when asked at a parliamentary hearing today, he could name only the US, Australia and New Zealand. The Green MP, Golriz Garaman, says that's shocking and she wants the Foreign Affairs Committee to hold an independent investigation. East Otago residents have begun receiving their blood test results for lead contamination. 9 days ago, residents of Waikawaiti, Karitane and Hawkesbury village were told not to drink or cook with their tap water. A free community clinic has tested hundreds of people since it opened on Tuesday. Karitane mother of 3, Jazir Hansen, says it was a relief to see the results for her 5-month-old son showed less than half the acceptable threshold for lead. She says she was hoping to get the rest of her family's results at the same time, but has been told they will come individually.
At the time, when you're trying to digest information and then they don't know where yours is, you start to panic because you're like, oh, are they not telling me because they need some advice first before they tell me, or what's the deal? So it's like a wee bit of panic as well.
Jazz Hansen of Karitane. The Wellington City Council could increase rates by 17% in the next year to pay for infrastructure and resilience. The budget for the city over the next 10 years, unveiled today by Mayor Andy Foster, is focused on upgrading the city's ageing and failing water pipes. Money has also been tagged for earthquake strengthening key public buildings, such as the Central Library, and for the transport program Let's Get Wellington Moving. Mr Foster says the capital investment needed will be the largest the city has ever made. Plans for a controversial Christchurch Cycleway will continue despite an attempt to stop it. Wheels to Wings is planned for the main thoroughfare of Harewood Road, linking the city to the airport and surrounding areas. Harewood Councillor Aaron Ken has been voicing the concerns of frustrated residents and business owners over the process.
If we'd gone out with multiple options, we would have had a completely different outcome from the community. Hopefully this waste of time today will get us to a point where we can move forward.
Aaron Kewen says a range of other design options will now be presented and the community will feel more involved when changes are made. A Saudi human rights activist has been released from prison after nearly 3 years behind bars. Lujain Al-Hathlul was accused of crimes that rights groups describe as politically motivated. The BBC's Lise Doucette reports.
Lujain is at home. Her sister Lena posted on Twitter with several exclamation marks. Al-Hathlul has become the face of dissent in the Saudi kingdom. She was jailed in 2018, just before the ban was lifted on women's right to drive, a cause Al-Hathlul had advocated for many years. Saudi officials deny her detention was linked to her activism. She's out of prison now, but her family emphasises she's still not free. She's on probation and banned from travelling.
Least to set with that report. In the United States, dozens of former Republican Party officials who view the party as unwilling to stand up to Donald Trump are believed to be in talks to form a centre-right breakaway party. 4 people involved in the talks have told Reuters the aim is to run on a platform of, quote, principled conservatism. 120 people are reported to have taken part in a Zoom call last week. Names under consideration for a new party include the Integrity Party. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 6. Canterbury have snuck home against Central Districts to book their spot in the men's domestic T20 cricket final. Chasing 181 to win in Auckland after a 46-ball century from Stags batsman Will Young, the Kings were in trouble at 38 for 4. But Daryl Mitchell and Cam Fletcher combined to put on 132 for the 5th wicket, helping Canterbury seal a 4-wicket win with 1 ball to spare. They'll play Wellington in Saturday's final, and Fletcher says it's a great feeling.
We came into today and it was a knockout game, everything to play for. And we knew we had to go out there hard, and I thought we did an incredible job in the field today. But Will Young was amazing, and then to turn it around and to get the win is just an incredible feeling.
Michael Scott is stepping down after 3 years as Chief Executive of High Performance Sport New Zealand. He says COVID-19 is forcing him home to Melbourne to be closer to family. Scott finishes at the end of April when Sport New Zealand boss Raylene Castle will take over as acting CEO. Defending women's champion Sophia Kenin has been dumped out of the Australian Tennis Open in the second round. The 4th-ranked American was beaten 6-3, 6-2 by world number 65 Kaia Kanepi of Estonia. Japanese media are reporting Tokyo Olympics chief Yoshiro Mori will step down tomorrow. The 83-year-old former Prime Minister has been under fire for sexist comments he made at a recent Japanese Olympic Committee meeting. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, Shobha Narayan explains why proposed deregulation has led to tens of thousands of Indian farmers marching on New Delhi. Even Rihanna's got in on the act. Dean Badgett Mercer debuts as our new forest correspondent tonight. What's fruiting in the forest and what's eating that fruit? And 10 years after the Christchurch quake, Alison Balance on what we've learnt about liquefaction on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland to Wellington, including central high country, also Wairarapa. Generally fine. Isolated showers about Wellington and Wairarapa tomorrow morning. For Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers clearing today, then mainly fine weather. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods and isolated showers clearing tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine. Marlborough, Nelson, Bulla and Westland, mostly fine. Scattered showers about Bulla and Westland clearing tonight. Canterbury, fine today, cloudy tomorrow morning. Drizzle about the foothills, then becoming fine. Otago, excluding Clutha, mainly fine. Isolated showers clearing tonight. Clutha, Fiordland and Southland, scattered showers clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The government is poised to expand the flexi wage scheme to help up to 40,000 unemployed people into work. Labor kicked off its election campaign by promising to expand the subsidy criteria and the average amount businesses can receive. It promised to roll the changes out before Christmas, but delays mean it will take effect from Monday. But whilst businesses are welcoming the changes, the opposition says they come too late and don't go far enough. Here's political reporter Yvette McCullough.
It was one of Labor's flagship campaign policies, a tangible example of its COVID-19 economic recovery plan. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the expanded flexi wage scheme will support businesses getting back on their feet to take on new workers.
It means that if they meet the criteria, the employer will be able to get financial support while their new staff member gets up to speed or while they potentially retrain. It also means they can possibly hold on to a valuable staff member who needs to retrain or upskill in order to move into a different role.
The changes increase the average amount businesses can receive to $7,500. Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni says the scheme has also been widened to include job seekers disadvantaged in the labour market who may not be receiving a benefit.
This specifically means those who are experiencing significant barriers to employment, experiencing low job security or are underemployed, have or are expected to experience extended displacement due to an economic disruption to their occupation.
Ms Ardern says despite the economic recovery going better than expected, this scheme is still important.
We cannot rest on our laurels. Even if 4.9% unemployment is considered internationally very low, that still represents people who will be looking for work, wanting the dignity of work, and we must do everything we can to help support them in that.
Business New Zealand is welcoming the changes. CEO Kirk Hope says it incentivises and gives businesses confidence to take on new workers. He's also applauding the $30 million that's been ring-fenced to support people out of work to start their own business.
It demonstrates that the government is really interested in a business-led recovery and that people who have been affected or they had their employment affected by COVID and don't perhaps want to work for someone else, it's an opportunity for people to start to undertake some innovation.
But National Social Development spokesperson Louise Upston says Labor promised this would be in place before Christmas, and the delay is not good enough.
If you lost a job in December, it has a serious impact on you. And I'm just really concerned. The Minister's kind of flippant comments in the House seem to indicate she's actually not that worried about the individual people who've lost their jobs, who are on benefits.
Ms Ardern rejects that.
A form of flexi wage through that entire period has been available. So I'm confident we wouldn't have seen people necessarily miss out as a result of the few extra weeks we put in just to make sure we really are reaching those employers and workers that we want to target the most.
Ms Upston says not only is the scheme late, it's underwhelming, and the government should adopt National's Job Start plan instead.
This is a bureaucratic system. MSD have to consider every application. There'll be no certainty for the business in terms of whether they're going to pass the threshold or not, and MSD will control for how long that payment continues. So we actually think Job Start was cleaner, simpler, faster, more effective.
Ms Upston says she was due to meet with Ms Zebuloni this morning to discuss Job Start, but the Minister cancelled without explanation. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
If you're just joining us, let's bring you up to date on the Otago drinking water lead contamination scare. Dunedin City Council this evening has confirmed that work has started, initial work, on replacing about 5 kilometres of very old cast iron water pipes that have lead joins in them. That work is on Edinburgh Street and adjoining streets, they say. They don't know the source of the lead contamination spikes at the moment, but they reckon this work will remove one potential source of contamination. It's expected that work will ramp up over the next 2 to 3 weeks and will cost in the vicinity of $6 million. The other announcement they've made this evening is that the Waikawaiti raw water reservoir will be drained early next week, and that's to allow lead joins to be replaced and sediment to be tested and cleaned out. So that raw water reservoir to be drained early next week. The other thing they're saying is that they have ordered online lead monitors which will draw water into sampling equipment for analysis, and that will provide results every 20 minutes. But that technology, those monitors, are expected to take 6 to 8 weeks to be delivered and installed and operational. To the US now, and US Democrats have played more harrowing footage from the Capitol riots last month and Donald Trump's second impeachment trial in the Senate. The Democrats have today and tomorrow to lay out their case, but so far Republican senators seem unlikely to change their minds. The BBC's John Sopel reports.
Day 2 of the Trump impeachment trial, and harrowing new pictures and sounds of what unfolded on January the 6th. The disbelief of the police.
They're throwing metal poles at us. Cruiser 50, give me DSO up here now! DSO! Multiple law enforcement entries! DSO, get up here!
The prosecution argument, this was the direct consequence of Donald Trump's words and actions that day and in the weeks leading up to it.
Donald Trump surrendered his role as commander-in-chief and became the inciter-in-chief.
And he told the story of an African-American policeman on duty who fought with the protesters for hours and was subjected to racial slurs. The Trump legal team were given a kicking for their poor performance yesterday. Donald Trump was reportedly furious, and this Republican senator changed his vote he was so appalled.
The issue at hand is it constitutional to impeach a president who's left office? And the House managers made a compelling, cogent case, and the president's team did not.
But it looks like the former president has the votes to avoid being convicted and banned from ever holding public office again. But even if Donald Trump's impeachment problems go away, his legal difficulties don't. They're piling up. And in Georgia, it's been confirmed that a criminal investigation has been launched after the president tried to persuade that state's Secretary of State to find him extra votes so that he would win and not Joe Biden. What makes this deeply problematic for Donald Trump, who was campaigning in Georgia after the election, is that him asking for those votes is not a question of rival accounts. It's on tape.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Election interference, one of the charges being looked at, is a felony offence. In other words, a crime that carries a prison sentence of more than a year. The mayhem at the Capitol grew out of Donald Trump's repeated claims that the presidency had been stolen from him. It would indeed be ironic if he were the one man charged with interfering in the 2020 election. John Sopel, Washington.
It is 15 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, just a quick reminder, if you're travelling in central Hawke's Bay tonight, State Highway 2 is closed at Takapo because of a large grass fire. The closures between the intersections with State Highway 50 and Ascot Road. Now, there's a detour in place, but people are being warned to expect delays there, so do take care. A former SIFS caregiver on trial for allegedly sexually abusing 8 boys in his care is accused of silencing his victims by threatening gang involvement. The High Court trial of Earl William Opataia, a former boxing coach and child, youth and family approved carer, began today in Auckland. Mr Opataia denies all 33 charges against him, including sexual violation and indecency against boys under 16. His lawyers say the claims are entirely made up in a bid by the complainants to get compensation. Jordan Bond reports.
Over a 5-year period in the early to mid-2000s, Earl Opataia ran an Auckland home for child, youth and family. More than 150 boys spent time in his care, including Liam Ashley, a teenager who was murdered in the back of a prison van by George Charlie Baker in 2006. 8 of these boys have alleged serious sexual abuse against Mr Opataia, as Crown Prosecutor Belle Archibald outlined.
He was supposed to care for them, and rather than provide these boys with the safe and secure environment that they desperately needed, Mr Opataia used them. Mr Opataia was paid by the state to care for these boys, and instead he exploited them.
Ms Archibald said the boys, many under 16 and all under 18 at the time, were vulnerable and from difficult homes. Under the cover of being their caregiver, she said Mr Opataia sexually abused boys over a number of years. Many of the particulars of the allegations are too graphic to report. She said one boy, 15 years old at the time, was invited into his room before Mr Opataia sexually violated him.
He made him a Milo, gave him a biscuit, and they shared a cannabis joint.
She said the boys said they were given drugs as a reward after being abused, and that Mr Opataia allegedly told one boy, "I get what I want when I want." And to keep it quiet, Ms Archibald said Mr Opataia intimidated them.
Many of the men were threatened by Mr Opataia to not tell anyone what was happening to them. Don't tell anyone or you'll get beaten up. I'll get the gang on you. Bad things will happen to your family. Nobody will believe you.
And allegedly told one,
"If you open your mouth, if you say anything, I'm going to kill you or hang you off the balcony by your neck."
Mr Opataia denies all the charges, with his lawyer Anushka Bloom calling the claims fabricated. In fact, she said Mr Opataia, coming from a difficult background himself, had a passion for helping troubled young people and setting them on a better path.
But what Mr Opataia says is that he did not abuse them sexually or physically. He did not hurt them. He helped them.
It was revealed in court that Mr Opataia had been convicted and did jail time for a 2014 assault of a separate, unrelated underage person. That complaint led police to launch this investigation. Mrs Bloom said the complainants in this case only raised an issue when the police came knocking. She said they had a history of lying and may have made up their claim of sexual abuse so they could be compensated financially. She said Mr Opataia never offended against any of the boys in Sif's care.
That this is how the seed was planted for the new false allegations, because Mr Opataia became a target. Once he was actually convicted of assaulting a young person, he was low-hanging fruit, ripe for the picking for false complaints. Who would believe him now?
The jury will hear evidence from a number of the complainants. The trial before Justice Galt is set down for 6 weeks. Atuiti ko te matua I Tamaki Makaurau, ko Jordan Bond. Aho.
Life may become even more difficult for Hong Kong citizens seeking refuge abroad, with Canada, Britain and now Australia changing their travel advice. It's after Hong Kong authorities announced dual citizenships no longer are recognised, meaning those with it are unable to seek foreign consular assistance. And as Beijing's influence over the city grows, thousands of Hong Kongers already living in Australia have quietly had their visas extended instead of returning home. The ABC's Bridget Fitzgerald reports.
At this quiet park beside a lake in Perth, this Hong Kong citizen who just wants to be known as Raymond reflects on the homeland he left behind.
Since I left, things getting worse and worse. They are trying to control the people in Hong Kong.
The 30-year-old chef arrived in Australia in 2015. He came here shortly after the so-called Umbrella Revolution, a series of pro-democracy protests against proposed electoral reform. The lack of response from the government was a signal to him things were unlikely to change.
Almost 1 million of Hong Kong people fight for democracy. However, after 100 days, government didn't respond for anything, so I feel really disappointed. So that's why I try to leave Hong Kong and find somewhere suitable for me.
Raymond's one of 12,000 Hong Kong passport holders currently in Australia on a temporary visa. Since the federal government announced its Safe Haven program in July last year in response to China's crackdown on pro-democracy activity, more than 2,500 Hong Kongers on temporary skilled and graduate arrangements have had their visas extended for 5 years. It's an automatic extension, but several Hong Kong citizens told AM everyone they know who's had the choice has opted to stay. Raymond says he could face arrest in Hong Kong for comments he's made on social media.
If I have chance to go back to Hong Kong, I'm for sure I may not bring my own phone, because I always say something about political in Facebook or Twitter. So if they check it, maybe I will get arrested as well.
Things have certainly gotten worse. If you talk to people who are there, the police presence is even more claustrophobic than in the past.
Graham Smith's a fellow at the Department of Pacific Affairs at the Australian National University. He says Raymond's concerns about returning home are valid.
The crimes under the national security law are so broad as to allow the police incredible latitude in interpretation. So you've had people rounded up for collusion with foreign forces for Twitter posts. Literally, they post on Twitter, it's something against the government, and it's broadcast to the world, to foreigners, therefore it's collusion.
There's no justice and there's also no freedom of speech in Hong Kong.
Claudia lives in Canberra and is a member of the pro-democracy group Australia-Hong Kong Link. She says her friends who've taken part in protests in Hong Kong have been beaten and jailed.
We don't even know what will happen if we go back to Hong Kong.
Raymond says many of his friends back home plan to move overseas, but that'll be more difficult now if Hong Kong refuses to recognise dual nationals. He wants to remain in Australia, even if that means renouncing his Hong Kong citizenship if he's granted an Australian one. He doesn't believe Hong Kong will ever be free of China's influence.
They're trying to control everyone, so end up Hong Kong will become just a city of China.
The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is yet to respond to questions over whether Australian Hong Kong dual nationals will be eligible for consular assistance in Hong Kong.
Bridget Fitzgerald with that report. Taika Waititi's back in the director's chair with production on his new movie, Thor, Love and Thunder, underway in Australia. But the hotly anticipated Disney superhero film's getting a helping hand from the Australian government, and it's feared local productions could be missing out. The ABC's Mario Christodolo reports.
Over the past few weeks, the celebrities have been pouring into Australia. Matt Damon, Chris Hemsworth, Chris Pratt, some of the biggest names in Hollywood. And they're here for what promises to be one of the biggest and potentially most lucrative superhero films of the next few years, Thor, Love and Thunder.
I am Thor, son of Odin.
Like many other Hollywood productions, this film has been lured to Australia by the Australian government, which dangled a $24 million grant to entice the production team to shoot here. But there's concern that money put towards attracting big-name Hollywood productions is being offered at the expense of Australian films. And those concerns are being voiced by one of the most revered figures in Australian cinema and theatre, playwright David Williamson.
Americans see themselves on their screens 98% of the time. I don't necessarily think we should only see 98% of our own accents on screen like the Americans, or it might turn us into them. But at the moment, we see about 12% of our stories on our screens.
David Williamson doesn't think subsidies to overseas films should be scrapped, but that the balance at the moment is wrong.
Look, I'm not saying that all subsidies should go, but for heaven's sake, the bulk of them should go to our own storytelling.
The author of some of Australia's most famous plays, Don's Party and The Club, believes constant subsidies to overseas productions may keep the local production industry alive, but it does not benefit local writers and directors.
Our technicians are terrific. They're renowned to be amongst the best in the world, and they get paid more for a big Hollywood blockbuster. So if I was a camera operator or a grip or something like that, I'd be saying, bring them on, bring them on. So we become a cheap foreign expertise for American stories.
It's a view that some say is backed up by hard numbers. Jean Tunney is an economist and former Treasury official.
The arguments that are made in favour of such assistance are that it provides jobs and it might stimulate a domestic film industry, so we'd have this growing domestic film industry, but I'm not sure there's a lot of evidence for the long-term benefits.
And Jean Tunney worries that the subsidies and grants help prop up a local industry that without international productions would otherwise be unviable.
We had to subsidise the car industry in Australia for 6 decades, whether via tariffs, which meant that Australian consumers paid more for cars, or by explicit subsidies. Ultimately, that industry wasn't viable. So these infant industries never grow up.
The federal government spends millions of dollars subsidising Australian film, but that support has been on the wane. Late last year, the federal government said it would be reducing a key tax offset for producers of Australian film, which fell from 40% to 30%. It is also scrapping the so-called Gallipoli clause, which enables filmmakers to include costs from overseas filming in their expenditure figures. Matthew Diener is the Chief Executive of Screen Producers Australia.
If the government continues down that path, it means that there won't be as many films made, and it will mean that the sort of benefits that films have been able to project into Australia, both for the benefit of the Australian community, but also the way the Australian image is portrayed globally, and all the economic benefits that happen on Australian films, that will diminish.
He says major international films might generate jobs in the short term, but a healthy Australian film industry would provide more long-term stability.
Bringing them down here is not a bad thing. It's stimulating the workforce here, but we've got to think about the long term and what that means for our industry.
And that report was from the ABC. The oldest known person in Europe has survived COVID-19 and will celebrate her 117th birthday today. The story of French nun Sister Andre, who's the second oldest person in the world, has lifted spirits in France and around the world where lockdowns continue. Lucy Fielder reports.
Europe's oldest person is blind, a Catholic nun, and now also a survivor of coronavirus. The French nun, Sister Andre, will celebrate her 117th birthday this week.
Est-ce que ça vous a inquiété à un moment?
That's the spokesman for her care home in southern France asking her if she was scared. Her reply was that she didn't even know she had the virus, and when she learned she did, she wasn't afraid of dying. Lucille Rondon took the name of Sister Andre when she joined a Catholic charitable order in 1944. David Tavella, the spokesman, says despite the virus, there'll still be birthday celebrations.
Sister Andre's birthday is taking place at a good time. It couldn't be a better time, because it will mark the beginning of big festivities that will be organised around the relaxed restrictions. Our residents will be able to get out of their rooms, eat together, participate in activities. And yes, Sister Andre's birthday takes place just as this is happening, and this will allow us to bring everyone together once again. And we owe this to our eldest resident. It's very touching and relieving for the residents, for the families, and for the care workers.
Now, according to the New York Times, Sister Andre has a jam-packed birthday ahead. She's got calls booked in with her family and the Mayor of Toulon, and the local bishop will also visit. She'll then sit down to a 4-course meal, which includes her favourite dessert, a raspberry and peach baked Alaska. Port, red wine and a glass of champagne are also on the menu, so a busy day for her. Just an update on the Takapo fire in central Hawke's Bay. It's now under control, but it's whipped through about 35 hectares. Their fire service says it's not out just yet. There are some hay bales still burning in the area. We told you before that State Highway 2 is closed. It's still closed, but should be open around 7, but they're asking motorists be careful because there's still going to be fire equipment around. See you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Green Party says it's absolutely galling that Air New Zealand's chief executive cannot name all the countries whose militaries have had contracts with his company. Wellington ratepayers are facing a 17% increase in the next year to pay for infrastructure and resilience. In the United States, dozens of former Republican Party officials who view the party as unwilling to stand up to Donald Trump are believed to be in talks to form a centre-right breakaway party. Health authorities in Victoria are ramping up contact tracing and mass testing of residents in Melbourne after a new COVID-19 cluster linked to a quarantine hotel grows to 10 cases. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
We've had planning legislation in this country since 1926, and the RME is definitely beyond its sell-by date.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
The government has also introduced, along with that hotel quarantine, a maximum 10-year jail term for people who mislead officials about where they've been.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Thanks, Karen. Brian Crump getting ready for another night on RNZ National. 2 interviews